Welcome to Chapter 6. If you enjoy the story, please like and subscribe and leave a comment, good or bad. Your feedback helps me improve. After a full year trapped in silence, Ollie finally stepped outside. The hospital lights spilled behind him, cold, sterile, unforgiving. Rain dotted the pavement like tiny echoes, and the city moved on as if nothing had happened. He carried one small bag, but it felt heavier than his whole body, not because of what was inside, but because of what was missing. He didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. Tonight wasn't the start of healing. It was the start of something harder, revenge. One step forward and no way back. Every night, Ollie fought the same enemy, his own helplessness. He had no magic, no power. So he trained until his knuckles split and the rain washed the blood away. Each punch landed like a question. Why was I the one left behind? The bag swung, the ropes creaked, and his breath tore through his chest. But he kept striking, not to become a hero, not to impress anyone, just to force the world to admit one thing. He was still here, and he wasn't done. Ollie ran until the city blurred into nothing. Rain slapped his face, and every breath burned like glass in his throat. His legs failed, one knee hit the asphalt hard, and the world tilted. But he didn't stop. He planted his hands on the road, forcing air back into his lungs. Not to survive, to keep going. Because if he quit now, the only thing left would be the memories, and he refused to live as a broken echo. Days didn't heal him. They just repeated, morning, night, rain, and the same ache in his chest. He trained until his hands needed wrapping, then trained again. He watched the city wake up like nothing had happened, while his world stayed stuck on the same moment. But somewhere in that repetition, a decision hardened inside him. Not home, not comfort, just a promise. He would keep moving, until the day the past finally answered him. A new day, a new line, and the same silent test. People laughed, talked, showing off tiny sparks like it was nothing. For them, power was normal, just another part of life. Ollie kept his eyes forward and his mouth shut. He wasn't here for pride. He was here for proof, any proof that he could change his fate. But even before his turn arrived, he could feel it, the sideways glances, the quiet judgment, as if the outcome was already decided. The room was quiet, too quiet. Ollie pressed his palm to the sensor and held his breath. A second pass, then another, and the needle didn't move, not even a twitch. He tried again, pressing harder, like willpower could force mana into existence. But the machine stayed cold and honest. Around him, the air felt heavier than before. Because this wasn't just failure, it was confirmation. The world wasn't going to hand him anything. He didn't hear the words clearly, but he didn't need to. The look said enough, a half smile, a whisper behind a hand. The kind of judgment that doesn't shout, it just decides you're worthless and moves on. Ollie stayed still, refusing to react, because reacting would mean they mattered. But inside, something tightened, a quiet anger sharpened by humiliation. Not loud, just steady and dangerous. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars, footsteps, voices. Life flowing like nothing had changed. Ollie walked through it like a ghost. The test was over, but the verdict stayed. No power, no class, no shortcut, just his own body, and a promise that wouldn't fade. If the world refused to give him strength, then he would carve it out, day after day, until even the impossible had to break. Ollie didn't work with hunters as a teammate. He worked his weight. They handed him ropes, crates, and orders, like his body was the only thing worth renting. A few coins hit his palm, cold and small. Not payment, a reminder. If he wanted to stand near gates, this was the price. They didn't see Ollie as a teammate. Just hands. Just a back that wouldn't complain. Faster. Carry this. Move. Orders came like rain. Constant, cold, and endless. Ollie said nothing. He tightened the ropes, lifted the weight, and kept walking, because silence was cheaper than pride. They walked ahead laughing, talking like the gate was a stage. Ollie stayed behind with the real burden. He watched their confidence, how easily they moved, how lightly they breathed. He watched the flashes of power when they practiced little tricks, and hated how normal it was for them. He kept his eyes down, because looking up would only remind him what he didn't have. At night, the city stayed loud outside, but his room stayed empty. Coins sat in his palm, small, cold, almost insulting. He wasn't counting money. He was counting how many days he could take this before something inside him snapped. Ollie closed his fist, breathed once, and promised himself he would not stay this small forever. Morning came fast. Same ropes, same crates, same faces that didn't bother learning his name. The green glow of the gate waited behind the barricades like a warning light. People joked, checked weapons, stretched like it was routine. Ollie only adjusted the straps and stepped forward. If his life was going to change, it wouldn't happen at home. Inside the gate, the air felt different, thicker, older, wrong. They called it easy. Ollie wasn't allowed to fight, so he stayed back, watching blades move, watching magic flare in other hands. Every effect was clear, light, heat, shock, and every time it happened, it only proved one thing. Power existed, just not in him. In a gate, weakness is loud. The load dragged his balance, and something in the dark noticed. A monster moved, fast enough to punish one mistake. Ollie caught himself before he fell, heart hammering. No one rushed to help, because to them, he wasn't someone to protect. He was something that could be sacrificed. He hit the ground, mud, pain, breath gone. And the first hand that grabbed him didn't pull him up gently. It yanked. It shook. It blamed. Like the danger was his fault. Like the weight was his choice. Ollie clenched his jaw and stood anyway. Not because he felt brave, but because he understood something simple. Falling here meant dying alone. They didn't apologize. They pointed, laughed, talked over him like he wasn't even standing there. Ollie kept his face blank, shoulders tight under the straps. He swallowed every word he wanted to throw back at them. Not because he was weak, because inside a gate, losing control could get you killed. So he memorized the voices instead and kept moving. When it was over, they counted rewards like the gate was a game. Ollie stood in the rain, soaked through, holding the last bag. A few coins dropped into his palm. Casual, careless. Not gratitude, not respect, just payment for being useful. He closed his hand around them and said nothing, because arguing wouldn't change his place in their world. Back home, the room felt smaller than ever. Rain tapped the window like someone trying to speak. Ollie stared at an old photo, faces from a life that no longer existed. He didn't cry. He just sat there, breathing slow, holding the silence. Not asking, why me anymore, but asking a colder question. How long before I stop being powerless? Next morning, he returned to the gate again. Not because he believed in miracles, but because staying away felt like surrender. He watched others light up the world with abilities they never earned. He carried the crates, the ropes, the gear, and the quiet shame that came with it. Then he stepped forward anyway, eyes on the green glow, as if repetition itself could force the world to change. That night, he trained like it was a ritual. Pain in, doubt out. He wasn't chasing a miracle. He was forcing an answer. And if the answer wouldn't come gently, he'd drag it out with every drop of blood. Ollie ran until the city became a smear of lights. Rain hit his face like punishment, and every breath burned like glass. He wasn't running to get stronger. He was running to reach the line, the edge where his body begged him to stop. Because maybe, only at collapse, the part of him that refused to die would finally answer. His legs finally gave out. One knee slammed into the asphalt, and the world tilted. Ollie planted his hands and stole a breath back. Not for strength, not for comfort, just to move, because stopping meant facing the past. He went back anyway, not for hope, for stubbornness. One more test, one more chance to prove the world wrong. Ollie pressed his palm to the sensor and held his breath. Cold glass, harsh lights, a quiet room pretending it didn't care. The needle didn't move. Nothing. The same dead needle. While outside, other people lit the world up without thinking. And somehow, that hurt worse than the first time. He didn't catch every word. He didn't have to. The hallway told him everything. The sideways glances, the half smiles, the quiet laugh swallowed behind a hand. Not loud enough to challenge. Just loud enough to label. Worthless. Hopeless. Already decided. Ollie kept walking, folder tight against his chest, eyes forward, jaw locked. Because the moment he looked back, the moment he reacted, it would mean they mattered. And he couldn't afford to give them that. Outside, the city didn't pause for him. Traffic rolled. Footsteps passed. Voices blended into the rain like background noise. People moved with purpose. Late to work, late to life. And none of them even looked his way. Ollie stood in the crosswalk and felt like a ghost. The test was finished, but the verdict followed him out the door. No power, no category, no shortcut waiting to be discovered. Just his own body, small against a world that worshipped strength and a promise he refused to bury. If the world wouldn't hand him anything, then he would build it, day after day, until even the impossible had to crack. He chose the only path that kept him near the gates. Not for money, not for respect, for proximity. If something in this world could change a person, it happened out there, where mana leaked into the air and death waited a few steps past the barricades. So Ollie carried their weight. Crates, weapons, supplies. He carried their jokes, too, the casual laughter of people who never feared being powerless. He didn't argue. He didn't ask to be seen. He just tightened the ropes and kept walking. Because even being used was still closer to the answer than sitting alone with nothing but no. Night didn't give him rest. It gave him silence and the damage the day left behind. He sat on the edge of the bed, hands shaking as he threaded the tape through his fingers. Wrap, pull, hold. Blood soaked into the cloth like it belonged there. He didn't curse. He didn't complain. He just breathed through it, slow, controlled, like pain was another weight to carry. Because tomorrow would come fast, and the gates would still be there. And if he wanted an answer, he couldn't afford to stop. Emma saw him first. A white-haired figure cutting through the rain, hands wrapped, shoulders tense, moving like the cold didn't exist. Henry followed her gaze and went still. He looked thinner, quieter, but there was something different in the way he walked. Not lost, not begging, deciding. Ollie didn't even notice them at first. His eyes were fixed ahead, on the green glow in the distance, like the gate was a destination, not a warning. Emma took a step forward. Ollie, he stopped, just for a heartbeat. Then he turned his head enough for them to see it. The bruises, the exhaustion, and the calm underneath it. The kind of calm you get after you've already accepted pain, and kept going anyway. They didn't rush him. They closed the distance slowly, like they remembered how fragile people can be. Ollie didn't soften. His bandaged hands tightened, as if the world was about to take something again. Henry didn't ask what happened. He didn't look at the bruises like they were a story to read. He reached for the bag, slow enough to give Ollie time to refuse. And that was the point. Not pity, not charity, just presence. Just, I'm here. Emma offered it like a reflex, like she'd done this 100 times for teammates. Ollie didn't know how to answer that. His stomach pulled him forward, and his instincts pulled him back. Rain slid off his sleeves, and the silence stretched. Then his hand moved. Slow, controlled, not gratitude, just survival, and the first crack in the wall he'd been living behind. For a moment, it wasn't about gates. It wasn't about tests. It was just 3 people under a tarp, sharing water like it mattered. Emma's smile didn't pity him. Henry's gaze didn't measure him. And Ollie, without meaning to, laughed. Quiet, unpracticed, like his throat didn't remember the shape of it. He looked down at the bottle in his hands and realized something. This was the first time today he didn't feel like a burden. Henry didn't teach him power. He taught him balance, where to place his feet, how to breathe, how to stop shaking, how to keep his hands up, even when his arms burned. Ollie copied every movement like it was a lifeline, because for him, it was. A way to change, without magic. A way to become harder to break. By morning, Emma didn't speak like a leader. She spoke like someone who'd seen fear before. She showed him a simple rhythm. Breathe in slow, breathe out slower. Like pulling himself back from the edge. Ollie copied it quietly. Not because it fixed him, but because it was the first help he didn't have to earn. For the first time, Ollie wasn't walking alone. No orders. No pressure. No one counting what he owed. Just 2 people matching his pace. Henry on one side, steady like a wall. Emma on the other, smiling like the world hadn't given up on him. Ollie didn't say much. He didn't know how. But in those quiet steps, the weight in his chest finally felt lighter. It wasn't a celebration. No medals. No speeches. Just warm bowls, and 2 people who treated him like he belonged at the table. The room was loud. Plates, laughter, simple life. And Ollie realized something scary. Peace can feel unfamiliar when you've lived in survival too long. He didn't smile easily. But this time, he didn't push it away. Emma didn't ask what happened to his hands. She just opened a fresh wrap and started fixing what she could. No pity, no lectures, only steady fingers and quiet patience. Ollie watched in silence, because he wasn't used to help that didn't cost something. But her hands didn't shake, like his pain was normal, and his survival mattered. It wasn't some heroic gift. No expensive blade. No dramatic speech. Just gloves, picked with care, like this was normal. Like Ollie belonged here, in the middle of their plans. Henry didn't say, "You'll be strong." He didn't need to. He just handed him protection. And for the first time, Ollie felt it. Someone was investing in him, before he had anything to prove. Ollie tried to keep up again and again. His lungs burned. His legs shook. And then, his body finally gave out. But he didn't hit the ground. Henry caught him like it was normal, like failing here didn't mean he was worthless. After the drills, Emma didn't push him to talk. She just offered water, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Ollie hesitated, then took it with both hands. A small sip, a quiet breath, and for a second, he smiled. Not because everything was fixed, but because someone cared. Days started to stack up, quietly. Not heroic, not special, just errands, cheap supplies, training gear. But they moved like a unit. Henry watching the front, Emma keeping the pace gentle, and Ollie, finally walking in the middle, like he belonged there. At sunset, the world looked normal again. No gates, no screams, just wind and distant lights turning on. Ollie didn't know what tomorrow would take from him, but standing there, breathing, he realized something small. He was still here. That night, no one made speeches. They didn't ask him to explain the past. They just shared one small room, one warm light, and one quiet routine. For Ollie, it felt strange, like a place you could breathe, like a family that didn't need words. The mission looked easy. A deer gate, right outside the city. No alarms, no crowd, no noise. But the closer Ollie got, the quieter the world became. His stomach tightened, like the air itself was holding its breath. Something here was wrong. Henry didn't say anything. He just tightened his gear and placed himself in front. Emma's eyes were calm, like she'd done this 100 times. Ollie tried to copy that calm, but his heartbeat wouldn't slow. The gate was silent, and that silence felt like a warning. They stepped forward together. Henry first, no hesitation. Emma right behind him, steady and calm. Ollie followed, forcing his feet to move. The green light touched his skin like cold water, and the world outside disappeared, as if the gate swallowed sound itself. The moment they crossed, the air changed. Cold, wet, heavy. Water dripped like a slow clock, and every step echoed too loud in the dark. Henry signaled them to stay close. Emma kept her breathing steady. Ollie listened to the silence, and felt it listening back. The first monster came fast, small, hungry, desperate. Henry didn't flinch. One step, one strike, and it dropped like nothing. Emma barely moved. Ollie only watched, realizing how far behind he still was, and how safe they were, as long as Henry stood first. Then another one rushed in, and this time Emma answered. No dramatic chant, no spectacle. Just a simple spell, clean and controlled. The creature dropped instantly. Ollie watched the way she moved, calm like breathing, and wondered what it felt like to have power that didn't shake. Ollie didn't swing a weapon. He didn't cast a spell, but he saw it, 1 second before it happened. A shadow moving at Emma's side. He grabbed her and yanked her back, hard. The claws missed by inches. And in that moment, Ollie understood his role. If he couldn't fight, he could still save. Minutes passed, and nothing pushed back. No swarm, no ambush. Just weak creatures, one after another, gone too fast. Henry didn't like it. Emma stopped smiling, and Ollie felt the quiet growing thicker, because in gates like this, easy never lasted. The corridor opened, and the cave swallowed them. Bigger, deeper. The ceiling vanished into dark rock, and the air turned heavy, like invisible hands on their shoulders. Henry slowed. Emma's focus sharpened. Ollie's chest tightened, because this room didn't feel empty. It felt weighting. Something shifted in the air, not wind, pressure. Emma's hair snapped sideways like the cave exhaled. Ollie's eyes widened, his breath catching in his throat. For a split second, everything blurred. Dust lifted, sound warped, and the world felt unstable. This wasn't a normal gate anymore. It was waking up. Henry felt it first. Not a sound, just pressure, like the air had a pulse. His eyes narrowed, his body turning before he spoke. And then, At the edge of their world, a thin line appeared, a crack in the air that didn't belong. Small, quiet, and wrong. It didn't stay small. The tear widened, climbing upward like a wound in the world. Fog rushed toward it. Pebbles lifted off the ground. Henry planted himself, shield first. Emma's breath caught. Ollie stumbled back, because whatever was on the other side was trying to come through. The eyes didn't move, but the crack did. It widened with a soundless pull, and a shape began to form. Horns, stone-black skin, and a shadow that couldn't fully exist here. Not the real thing, a fragment, pushing through. Henry braced himself. Ollie couldn't breathe, because even a piece of that monster was enough. Henry didn't wait. He charged, full force, like he could end it fast. His strike landed solid, and nothing happened. No flinch, no crack, no damage. The red eyes just stayed there, calm, watching him try. That's when the fear changed shape, from panic to certainty. Emma tried to answer. Instinct, training, muscle memory. A simple spell, the kind that never failed. But the light flickered and died in her hand like a candle in water. No impact, no reaction, just silence in those eyes. And for the first time, Emma looked scared. Henry moved again. He didn't hesitate, didn't run, didn't think. He just stepped into the space between them and the thing. The strike came like a shadowed hammer. Armor screamed. The ground shattered with water and dust. And Henry, the wall that never fell, collapsed in a single hit. Ollie didn't think. His body moved before fear could settle in. He grabbed Henry under the armor and dragged him back, metal scraping stone. Emma sprinted toward them, still trying to understand what she'd just seen. Behind them, the shadow kept moving, one heavy step after another. Emma ran toward them, eyes wide, trying to make sense of it. The shadow slid behind her like a cold blade through fog and struck. The impact stole her breath. Her hand reached out once more, and with the last air she had, she whispered, "Ollie, live." Then a thin spray of red cut through the mist and stained the rock. Her arm reached out once more, then collapsed. Ollie held Henry tighter, realizing this wasn't a fight. Henry didn't stay down. He forced himself up, one broken breath at a time, then stepped in front of Ollie. Armor cracked, blood seeping through the seams, dripping onto the stone. Ollie stood behind him, hands shaking, too close to run. The shadow lifted its arm again, and Henry planted his feet and set his shoulders like a living wall. Henry stepped forward, and the shadow hit him. Metal snapped with a sound that didn't belong in a human body. A spray of red cut through the mist. Ollie's hands were still on the armor. Then Henry was ripped out of his grip, like the strike stole him away. One blow. That was all it took. Henry didn't fall all at once. First his knee hit the stone, then the rest of him followed. Ollie grabbed the armor, trying to hold him up, but Henry was too heavy now. Too still. His breath faded into thin, broken fog. Ollie dropped to his knees. The cave went unnaturally quiet, like it swallowed every sound except his breathing. His hands shook. His throat locked. Tears burned down his face as he stared at Henry. And then his voice cracked. Why is this happening to me? And to my friends? He said it like the question could stop time. Like someone, somewhere, would answer. He didn't even have time to stand. The shadow decided it was his turn. No warning. No words. A claw came down through the fog like an executioner's blade. Ollie twisted too late, throwing up an arm on pure instinct. Not to win, just to survive one more second. The air tore. The ground trembled. And Ollie realized this wasn't punishment. This was the end. Ollie never saw the strike. His body gave out, knees buckling, breath slipping away. The claw still came down, fast enough to split the mist, and then it stopped. A clear wall flashed into existence for a heartbeat, like glass under pressure, rippling, cracking with thin lines of light. The blow froze inches from his face. The claw recoiled, not because it missed, but because something refused to let it through. The air shimmered in front of Ollie, ripples fading like settling glass. The shadow didn't advance. For the first time, it hesitated, staring at the empty space, as if trying to understand what kind of wall could stop it. The shadow didn't finish him. It leaned closer, just enough for the fog to tremble, and a low voice slid through the cave. Anyone who enters a gate with him dies. Then it turned away, and the crack sealed like it was never there. Boots splashed through shallow puddles. Flashlights carved trembling cones through the fog. Then the lead rescuer froze. There, on the stone, was a boy in black, white hair soaked with mist, bandaged hands limp, eyes closed. Blood streaked the ground, not enough to explain anything, only enough to prove it was real. The rescuer checked his pulse. Slow, weak, but there. One survivor, in a place that should have killed everyone. Daylight felt like a lie. The green gate stood behind them, quiet, untouched, like it hadn't swallowed a whole team. The stretcher rattled over the road as soldiers pushed it fast. Ollie didn't wake. Pale, bandaged, limp. People stared from behind the line. He wasn't carried out as a survivor. He was carried out as evidence. No one cheered. They didn't look relieved, only curious. As the stretcher rolled past, people leaned in behind the tape, not to help, but to watch. Whispers spread faster than the wheels. Some covered their mouths. Some looked at Ollie like he was contagious. And somewhere in those whispers, a story began. The guild didn't want grief. They wanted a file. Cold lights. A clean desk. Photos stacked like proof. Blood on stone. A wet corridor. The silent green gate. Then the stamp came down. Final. Behind the glass, people whispered anyway. Not about the dead, about the one name that came back alive. Night didn't comfort him. It gave the silence room to grow. Ollie sat beside his bed, staring at a framed photo like it could explain why he was still here. He'd trained until his body broke, and still found no power, no door, no answer. He didn't cry loudly anymore. He just breathed and let the emptiness speak. The room stayed cold and still, but Ollie's mind didn't. He lifted his eyes, and faces appeared where they shouldn't. Emma, smiling like everything was normal. Henry, standing solid like a shield. For a second, they felt real, warm enough to touch. Then the light faded, and the room reminded him he was alone. Ollie's fingers tightened around the knife, like it was the last thing he could control, but his hand wouldn't stop shaking. The room was too quiet, as if even the air was waiting for his choice. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of waking up tomorrow and living the same nightmare again. Staring at the cold steel, he whispered, "Maybe I should have died with them." Darkness didn't end, it just thinned. Ollie's eye barely opened when something cold and mechanical pressed into his mind. Not a voice, the message. Words flashed like they were carved into glass. "You can't die." Then another line appeared. "Merciless. Skill acquired. Pain. All pain, times 20. And Ollie understood. This wasn't rescue. It was a sentence. And that's where Chapter 6 ends. Not with victory, but with a rule carved into his mind. He didn't gain strength. He didn't find hope. He only learned this. Even death won't take him. And if he can't die, then the pain has somewhere to go. Somewhere to grow. Chapter 7 begins with the price of staying alive. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe. And if you have any feedback, leave a comment below.